Hello everybody, welcome to Chasing Whitetails. I'm Jack, and today I'm going to be going over my 2023 whitetail season, looking at the highs and the lows, and just seeing where I could have overall improved to increase my odds, and learning from my mistakes so hopefully I can make 2024 a better year.
Well, get you some, boy. Woo!
So now let's jump right into it. First, let's look at my season in northern Minnesota. I go to school up in northern Minnesota. I hunt public land up here, and it was difficult. This is my first time hunting public land. I've been fortunate enough to be able to hunt private land my entire life. So now I go up here not having a clue how to hunt public and trying to get on deer. So I call the game warden, see what kind of lands I can hunt. And I actually found a lot of tax forfeit land I could hunt. And so I jump right in there, dive in. Now we got to learn deer sign, looking for scrapes, rubs, beds, and food. And just seeing how these deer move in the city limits, because up here in these northern country, Minnesota, the wolves just have such a big impact on the population of deer. The deer are actually forced in town because to get away from the wolves. They can't survive if the wolves keep pushing them out in the country. So they move into the city limits, and I actually hunted a lot in people's backyards, which was unusual, but I think it did help because the deer were forced to live in these areas to get away from the pressure. And they were used to human interaction. They were used to human smell, because people are just cooking right off their back porches, and there's deer everywhere behind their houses, and I don't even think they knew it really, but it was fun. I found a couple spots. One spot in particular was my most successful hunt. As you see in the video footage, there's a fondo, two fondos, spike buck, and a doe. Mature doe actually came up later, but she kind of knew I was there. I wasn't in the greatest tree possible, but I still saw a mature animal, so I was excited. I was ecstatic. And it was just a great learning experience. I highly recommend it to anyone who wants to expand themselves as a hunter. Hunting public land is one of the ways to do that, and that's just diving into it and just figuring things out. My private land, it's just you hunt ladder stands. I didn't used to really worry about the wind. Kind of just did whatever I wanted to do, which was pretty detrimental to the property. But public land has forced me to actually think about those things so I can increase my odds and hopefully put myself in a position to kill a mature animal. And that pretty much sums up my northern Minnesota season. And next it's off to Wisconsin. Now for Wisconsin. Wisconsin was probably the most fun. I bow hunted during the gun opener, but it was just a time me and a bunch of buddies were able to get together and actually live and enjoy the deer camp experience. It was my first time ever really participating in a deer camp, and it was fun. It's just fun to be able to hang out with your friends, have a couple of beers, and just tell stories and not really have to worry all that much about hunting. It's more just spending time together, and it's just nice to be able to take weight off my shoulders, and I don't have to get so much into it. And it's just have fun. We actually ended up getting a smaller buck out of the group of us, and it was just fun to be able to enjoy it and gather around this animal and let it bring us together. I'm going to keep it pretty short and sweet, but I am excited for Deer Camp 2024. Finally, the Oklahoma season. I was fortunate to be able to go to Oklahoma twice for the archery season, and it's my favorite time of the year. The bucks down there just seem to be bigger in racks, smaller in bodies, but big in racks, so it's pretty fun to hunt them. We were down there for about a week, my girlfriend and I. It was warmer weather, but right as we were going to leave, a cold front came in, and the bucks began rutting like crazy. The bucks were chasing around does, and we kept noticing centralized in the property, there's a grass field, and we kept noticing that bucks kept coming out of this eastern tree line and coming to the feeder, chasing around a bunch of does, and then going back to this tree line. So I thought, hey, we should set up on that tree line with a south wind hitting us in the face, and they might come out of there and we could kind of pinch them in between there. And this is the most fun I've had in a while hunting, and it gets pretty interesting. The opening clip comes from this specific hunt. Right off the start, a small 6-pointer came screaming across the field, and this is midday, just kind of out of the blue. He stopped, kind of checked some things out, kind of observed the surroundings, and jumped the fence and went into the bedding area and didn't really mind us. He was about 50 yards away. Then later on, a doe and a fawn actually did the same thing. Came running across the field, and she kind of slowed to a slight jog, and I thought in my head, okay, I'm going to grab my bow, act like this is a buck, practice like it's the real deal, and let's see if she notices. So she approaches the fence, kind of looks around, and I reach for my bow, and she immediately pinpoints me. Stops, does the head bob, stomps, and then wheezes and runs away. And it's like, are you serious? Am I that far in the open? I'm sitting in a cedar tree, so I think I'd be pretty enclosed, but obviously not. So my morale's kind of down, but thankfully the night ended up being great. Deer began coming from the north side of the property and feeding south, and with my binoculars I could tell one of the bucks was Acorn. Acorn is a buck that is probably 4.5, 5.5. He's not very big, but his rack is cool in the way it's non-typical. He's kind of got a little circle, like an acorn on his rack, and that's how he gets his name. But he was feeding towards us with another 8-pointer, and as time went, they kept getting closer, and eventually they got to the other side of the fence, but instead of jumping over it, they went west and crossed the tree line towards the feeder. And I started thinking, well, hopefully they come our way like they have in the past, and I can get a shot. But unfortunately, the bucks continued to use that tree line as a way to get back and forth, and they weren't coming my direction necessarily, so I decided to crawl down out of the tree slowly because it was getting dark, and I was going to try and get close to that spot where they kept going back and through so I could get a shot. But a key note is, prior to me crawling down from the tree, a coyote actually came underneath the gate in front of us and started going down that tree line. And we lost sight of him, and then this is when I got down, crawled underneath the fence, and as I was crawling, you could hear a bunch of running. And I looked to my right, on the other side, and 2 does are chasing this coyote, just pounding on him with their feet, and he flees, but he brought these does like within 20 yards of me. So I'm laying on my belly and looking at these deer, and I'm trying to scoot up so I could get to this opening, but as I scoot, they see me. But they're like, is that something? Is that not? And we kept continuing this game, and I didn't know, but another bigger buck, bigger 8, and he actually has a little, on video, we can't see it here, but he's got a little stub drop tine coming off his rack, off his main beam. And he was going towards the feeder as I was crawling, and I ended up wasting probably 20 to 30 minutes playing this game with this deer over there. And he was actually done feeding at this point, and he started coming back towards me like in the opening clip. And this is where things get really interesting. So I keep etching myself along. They kind of bump off, look at me. They didn't wheeze or anything. I kept doing this. But as I'm doing this, and finally I'm just stopped. And I'm like, okay, maybe they'll just kind of just move away. But as I'm looking this way, this 8-pointer is coming towards me face first with a frontal shot. And I mean, right as I turn my head left to continue going again, because I was kind of giving up because it's getting dark, I see him. That's when you see him paused. And he's just staring at me, probably 15, 20 yards away. And he caught me right-handed. I wasn't ready. And he just ended up bumping off. And that was the end of that hunt. But when I tell you my adrenaline was pumping when I turned back, it was pretty fun. Oklahoma's always a fun hunt because it's a different area, different scenery, and I just enjoy it all together. So I'm excited for 2024. And now I know how these deer are using that tree line to get back and forth differently than what I thought they were using it. So I'm excited for next year, and we'll see how it ends up being. Now for my late season in southern Minnesota. This season was pretty short and sweet. I had break during school and I got to hunt on my home property. We have a 5-acre alfalfa field. So I sit along the edge of that and I saw does practically every day. There was only a few instances where I saw a couple bucks, a spike buck, and then I saw a pretty good sized 8. I'd say decent. It'll be good next year. And I didn't get a shot. He was across the field, which was 70, 80 yards away. He never came closer. I'm not comfortable taking that far of a shot. So he snuck on by, and that was pretty much it. Seeing how they move in that field, I know how to change it, and I want to make changes to it next year. I'm going to implement some screens and food plots. I'm going to try and draw them towards me, and I might even have to cut down some trees to force them towards me, so that way I can have more of a chance to get a shot, and that way I'm not just staring across the field watching them, doing a nature watch. There's a couple spots on this property that were manipulated prior to the season, so they weren't as hot. So this was kind of the only area that remained unchanged. But this whole property is getting a makeover. I'm gonna implement a lot of new things: bedding areas, food plots, screens, change access routes for next year. And if any of you guys are curious on what I'm doing and how I am going to do it, I can feel free say that you would like it, and I could show you guys my plans. And that's about it for the 2023 season. It was a lot of highs and lows. I did learn a lot, and I'm excited for 2024. Thank you guys for watching.